Exactly 100 years ago today, during the reign of George V, in the village of Black Boughton in Oxfordshire, Lady's Maid Annie and Police Sergeant Joseph William Gray welcomed their first son into the world and named him Joseph Henry. Little did they know that he would still be celebrating his birthdays a century later, and what a century it's been. Let's have a look at the milestones in the last 100 years. Few people can say they've lived through the last 10 decades and witnessed so many changes to their everyday life. When Henry was born, there was no electricity in the house, no hot water, and no central heating, no flush toilet even. Roads were empty, as cars were only owned by the very rich, and family entertainment was usually made by singing around the piano or playing games. Longevity is not unknown amongst Henry's relatives. An aunt was known to have lived to be 107, although there seems to be some doubt about the accuracy, according to a newspaper of the time. The young Joseph Henry, or Joe, or Harry as he was known, was joined by a younger brother, Christopher Thomas, some 3 years later, and the family was complete. Sadly, Mother Annie died early in life at 39, leaving Henry's father a widower trying to deal with 2 young lads. Thankfully, he went on to meet Emily, who he subsequently married, and the 2 brothers had a kindly stepmother who loved and looked after them as her own. Henry and Chris's school days were spent at a variety of different schools, due to their father's job as a police constable, moving around from one district to another. He was a tall, bright boy who worked hard and played hard at sports, cricket, hockey, rugby and football. He would always be a member of the school team. After leaving grammar school, he had a short spell as an office boy at an engineering firm in Wallingford before he landed the job that was to become his career. When he was 18, Henry began working as a trainee assistant weights and measures inspector in Oxfordshire, later moving to Kent, where he passed his Board of Trade examinations and qualified for the post of inspector. He then moved from Kent to Hampshire and worked from the offices in Bugle Street, Southampton. During this time, the war intervened. Henry was working in Southampton at the time of the Blitz, when a lot of the city suffered bomb damage. He narrowly escaped injury, or worse, when a British aircraft crashed into the pavement within feet of his car after getting tangled in the wires of a barrage balloon. He and another man managed to save the life of another car driver who was set alight by the petrol. He remembers being fired on by a German fighter plane and having to hide in a ditch. The role of a weights and measures inspector was classed as a reserve occupation. Henry became tired of waiting for the necessary authority to come through and volunteered to join the RAF. He became a volunteer reserve and after training served as a fitter armourer with 201 Squadron Flying Boat Unit and was posted to Loch Earn in Northern Ireland and later Pembroke Dock in South Wales, where he worked on short Sunderlands. The Sunderlands were mainly used in naval attack and escorting supply ships. He has a vivid memory of doing some maintenance work on the outside of a Sunderland when it started to taxi on the water. He had a white knuckle ride, clinging on to the outside of the plane for dear life until it came to a standstill. Thankfully, he is still here to tell the story. When the war was over and normality returned, driving to work, Henry would often pass an attractive nurse, in her uniform riding a bicycle. He started by offering her a lift, which became a regular thing. Many lifts later, romance subsequently blossomed, and Henry and Marion were married. Just in the nick of reproductive time, Marion fell pregnant, and Henry became a first-time father at 46.
Well, I arrived fairly late in Dad's life because he was already 46 by the time I was born, so he had plenty of living before I came along, but he took to being a dad like a duck to water, and he was a natural dad, he really was. I had an interesting childhood. Dad was always one to entertain and play with me, and I had some quite interesting toys, a bit of a range of boys and girls toys, so he maybe at one point he wanted a boy, but I had bows and arrows which Dad made for me. I had a sailboat, I certainly had a train set, an electric train set, and I think I even had a gun, so that made me the balanced human being I am today perhaps. He always encouraged my creative side, and I knew that he went to art college when he was younger, so when I was age 5 I said I wanted to go to art college like Daddy, and that probably ended up helping me to get into graphic design. We used to go drawing and painting, and he always helped me and tried to bring that side of things on. Also, he would take me for nature walks, and he knew all about nature and the birds and flowers and animals, so butterflies, so we went all through those things, and I learned a lot from him. But although he was fun, he was quite a disciplinarian, and I remember one evening my mum had told me to wait till your father gets home because I'd been naughty, and when Dad got home he said to me, right, you're going to bed and you can have a snack and some supper, or no snack and no supper. And I had to think about that for a minute because the Marmite sandwiches were too good, so I had to say I'd have the snack and the supper. Then when I was a teenager, friends and I used to go dancing in Southampton, and it was always Dad who would come and pick us up at 1:30 in the morning to make sure that we got home safely and we weren't on public transport. So how many fathers do that? Then when I was a bit older and bought my first house in Maidstone, it was a little wreck really, a very old house. And it was Dad that came up to Maidstone and camped out in one of the spare rooms in an uncomfortable setting and worked like a Trojan to get my house all up together. He laid parquet floor and scraped paint off the walls, and yeah, worked really hard and made it lovely in the end. And then of course I sold it. But he was the original new man. I think he was a very early form of new man because he was always able to cook very well and sew and clean. He didn't have any demarcation about whose job was whose. And many times I did sewing, which I got bored with, and making garments. And when I got fed up with doing them or couldn't work out how to do it, I used to give it to my dad and he'd fix it and sort it out. So I think that he probably spoilt me for meeting a husband, and it's been hard to find a man in my life to measure up to my dad, so I think I've got him to thank for the fact that I'm still single. But anyway, he was the best dad that a girl could ever have, and I love him very much.
Henry moved offices from Southampton to Winchester when he became Deputy Chief Inspector of Weights and Measures for Hampshire. His next change was when local government went through a major reorganisation in the 1970s and roles were redrawn. At this point, Henry moved to Basingstoke office in the new role of Divisional Trading Standards Officer in charge of North Hampshire. He retired a year later at 62. Henry has never been a bookworm or a couch potato. Reading or watching is just not for him. He's a doer. Creativity in many forms, nature and music are the main threads that have woven themselves through his life. His creative interests started at a young age when, as a schoolboy, he would sit on the side of the road drawing the village houses opposite. As an adult, he received some formal training at Art College in Bournemouth and later in Belfast. He became secretary of the Southampton Art Club and has had work exhibited at the Royal West of England Academy in Bristol. Henry's creative talents needed another outlet besides painting, and he started becoming interested in pottery. After taking a night school course, he invested in his own wheel and kiln and set up a pottery workshop in his garage, where he would disappear for hours at a time, throwing, glazing and firing. After retiring, Henry enrolled on a pottery diploma course at Southampton College of Art and continued to develop his techniques. He was later invited to help teach students how to throw pots on the wheel at night school in Winchester. Henry can certainly be called green-fingered and loves gardening. Plants would always thrive under his tender care, and in every house he owned, the garden was his pride and joy. Not only did he tend and nurture his flowers and shrubs, he also built garden pools, paths, rockeries, walls, made planters, trellises, bird baths, pergolas, patios. No specialists were ever brought in. He did it all himself, and he did it very well. Even when he moved into a first-floor flat in Northlands Drive, and his only outside space was a balcony, he still carried on growing his plants in pots. Besides his garden, he always kept an allotment, which delivered up a ready supply of fresh vegetables for the table. And when he didn't have an allotment, Henry advertised his gardening services in exchange for some of the vegetables he could grow. A lifelong interest of Henry's has been Freemasonry. He has played the organ for at least 7 lodges, some as a guest organist, and is also proud to be a founder member of more than one lodge. As a boy, Henry was taught to play the piano and took his first few music exams before his father stopped the lessons because he thought it would interfere with his schoolwork. He had a good singing voice and joined all the church choirs wherever they lived. He was even invited to become a chorister at Oxford Cathedral, but his father put his foot down about this. As an adult, his musical outlet was to play the piano and organ, and after retirement, he started up his own choir, formed of retired local government members, called the Ashburton Singers. They put on concerts and made special visits to retirement homes to entertain the residents. More recently, he composed the words and music for his own Christmas carol. Marion sadly died suddenly and unexpectedly aged 70 in 1985, and Henry found himself on his own again with four-legged companion Ben for company. He picked himself up and carried on with his life as best he could. But it was his interest in music that delivered up a lady who he would come to share many happy future years with. Tim, as she was known to her friends, joined the Ashburton Singers when she moved to Winchester, and her path crossed with Henry's. Shortly after meeting her, he felt sure that she was going to become part of his future. They were both interested in music and singing. Tim was already a member of the Southampton Choral Society, and Henry joined it too. One of her other interests was embroidery, which she was learning at evening class. Henry joined Tim's embroidery class, and from that moment on, another creative pursuit took over where pottery left off. Henry's artistic skills were employed as he created pictures in wools, silks and stitches, and made samplers. With Tim, he joined the Embroiderers Guild and was something of a celebrity as the only man in a large group of women. Henry's newfound embroidery skills kept him very busy. He made a name for himself in the world of Freemasonry, designing and embroidering banners, and over the years made a total of 30, most of which he designed himself and either embroidered or painted. Most recent banner was designed by Henry just over a year ago and went on to be embroidered by a specialist company. Henry and Tim did everything together for 12 happy years, and he even moved to a flat on the floor immediately above her, as close as he could manage to get. He always harboured hopes of marriage, which seemed to be off the cards. But then, one day, when the subject came up, Tim said, "Try me." They were married in 1999 and had more happy years together as man and wife until Tim's passing in 2003. Henry has filled his life with many interests and has chalked up some great achievements, not least reaching this 100-year milestone and looking 20 years younger. We would all like to know his secret. In his prime, he was often thought to look like matinee idol Errol Flynn, and more latterly to have a strong resemblance to Sean Connery. Many younger men would be envious of the good head of hair he still retains. And how many 100-year-olds are emailing on their iPads? So now, let us all raise our glasses, drink to Henry's remarkable achievement in reaching this very special day, and wish him a very happy and memorable 100th birthday.